Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations and Plugs. My name is Cliff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wago, and today we have such an exciting guest.
Yeah.
I called him multi-hyphenate, but he prefers to be called hybrid. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy and Cliff. My name is Moses Kemibaro. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Dot Savvy. It's a digital marketing agency. I'm also a podcast. I run a podcast called Pure Digital Passion, which I also happen to shoot here at Summerbox.
Yep.
I also am a technology analyst, meaning that I basically write things online, analyze trends, look at what's happening. I've been running a blog, I think now for almost 17 years at moseskemibaro.com. And generally, I'm very active on socials, predominantly talking about everything technology, digital marketing, digital media, and that's really my passion.
Yeah.
So I find that very interesting. Others than given when we met, and I think even in our discussions coming towards to this podcast, the power of media. And I just want to jump. I like jumping right into stuff.
Yes,
it just feels like it's the thing now. I think guys have talked about it for a while, but I'm just feeling like it's really taken off. Like even as guys say, for example, shooting this podcast, I mean, you've run a blog for almost 17 years now. Like, I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the shift in media, your own experience? Like, where are we going? Or is this the way to go?
I think absolutely. And I think the first thing is that let's just be real here. I think there's so many factors that come into play. But the first I think you need to think of is right now, when we think of media in the traditional media industrial complex, everything has changed, right?
Really?
The power or the fragmentation that existed in traditional media where, you had, even in Kenya, KBC, you had NTV and all this controlling the communication, the mass media for people. To a large extent, their relevance has been somewhat curtailed because of social media. And not just even just digital media, but specifically social media, because what social media has done is democratized the ability for people like yourselves and I to almost become a media of one.
Yeah.
The ability to, just use a smartphone to reach a global audience with our thoughts, our perspectives, things that matter to the audiences that we reach in a way that, was not possible 40 years ago. And that in itself really has allowed voices to rise, share different perspectives, and even find an audience or a tribe of people who subscribe to the things that we share. And I would say that arguably that media in the traditional sense has to reinvent itself to remain relevant in this new context.
Yeah, I mean, the landscape has really changed. I was reading somewhere where they're like, in the future, I guess maybe we're in the future, that everyone will be a media house.
Absolutely. Every brand needs to be a media house now. And, it's so fascinating because even some of the corporate clients we handle, like I remember I was in Tanzania about 2 years ago. I was doing some training there with Vodacom, and they've built an entire in-house studio for their own content production. They've understood that they have to have their own cameras, their own lighting, their own talent just to produce content.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of business are actually not realizing. I feel that, apart from the big boy, they're for a small business. Like you putting yourself out there, putting your own content, people understanding your process grows your business. It's one of those things that businesses need to tap into as well.
Yeah, and I think there's really no choice because if you think about what it costs today to build awareness for your business, your brand, either as an individual, as a company, we can all go to buy traditional media, which is far too expensive and is far too fragmented. We can go on the various advertising platforms, even on digital. But again, there you see it's quite competitive these days, even in Kenya. But if you're creating really interesting, compelling content for a specific audience or audiences, and it resonates and the algorithm decides to reward you with visibility because it's actually great content, then essentially for free, you have the opportunity to be seen and heard in a way that wasn't possible before. And I have this view that the biggest challenge that any business faces today, large and small, is obscurity.
Yeah.
Because if somebody doesn't even know you exist, how are they going to do business with you? If they don't see the wonderful product or service that you offer, how are they going to actually trade with you? And therefore, then the call to action is almost like, think about what it is that you do, what it is that you produce, or even what you're passionate about, if you're a thought leader. And then you're putting out content in the various formats that matter, whether it's video, audio, or written content, in a way that people can consume it and digest it. The other thing I think that's super critical, and this is something I've sort of learned over the sort of 17, 18 years of content, is you need to be sort of multi-platform and multi-content, meaning you might shoot this video today as a podcast. You then strip out the audio and it becomes an audio podcast. You then can either type it up yourself or use a tool like Otter to transcribe your podcast and then repurpose it as a blog post. And then that becomes social media posts when you create snippets and others. But the idea is that you have different audiences on different platforms with different appetites. And then you sort of, I call it atomization. You want to atomize your content so that it lives in different formats for different audiences in different places. And I'm saying this from personal experience because I meet people, and when somebody says, "Oh, Moses, you're the blogger," then I know you've been with me for 17 years or more, or, a long time. And then I meet other people who tend to be younger people and say, "Oh, you're the podcaster." And then I know that because I've been podcasting about 3 years. I'm like, so you're a new person, right? So you know me as a podcaster.
Yeah.
And then the podcasters don't know that I have a blog. And sometimes the bloggers don't know I have a podcast. So you realize they're completely different audiences, consuming essentially the same content, but they're all doing it in different places for different reasons with different demographics.
Yeah.
So every organization or every person today needs to think about that atomization model. Yeah.
Atomization. Why do you call it atomization?
It's kind of like the way you take, think of it almost like cutting down a tree. And then you're stripping it out for different purposes. You'll use the leaves for this, you'll use the branch for that, you'll use the trunk for this. And the idea is that you're taking the same source material, but you're breaking it down, in so many different ways that it reaches the widest possible audience and it connects with them in the way that they feel is most relevant. So case in point is I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't watch them. I when I'm driving, say somewhere like here, between meetings, I'm taking a walk, I'll generally listen to audio. It's quite rare that I sit down and watch a 1 hour YouTube podcast. I tend to listen more than anything. But it means that for those who prefer to listen versus watch, I'm not losing either one of them.
Yeah.
I'm making sure that I'm relevant and visible. Some people prefer to read. So I make sure that I do a synopsis of the podcast as a blog post. So you're just reaching as many people in every context possible in the way they prefer to consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like one of my favorite words, value addition, because it could be the same kind of long form video.
Yes.
And then it can be cut down further into these are the snippets
Correct.
that TikTok needs to know about.
Correct.
LinkedIn needs to know about the blog and the article or even the video.
Correct.
So it's very interesting just how you've positioned yourself, that you're going to create value in every space that you manifest yourself in.
Correct.
And that's powerful. I remember us having a conversation about people and how you need to position yourself in a way that you can amplify your thoughts, and that becomes thought leadership. And I think you have mastered that. You run a business. You've been doing it for 23 years. Started in 2000, the year 2000, right?
2002. Correct. Yeah. My little bed sitter. Yeah.
Yes. I was trying to remind myself what was happening in Kenya in 2002. And I think Mwai Kibaki had just become president.
Yes.
And so you came in at a time when the environment was hungry for new business and there was almost an ease of doing business. But I want to start talking about your journey as an entrepreneur. Because Dotsavi ran till 2010.
Dotsavi continues to run
till now, because I saw a little gap of like a year or two.
Within my creds?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So along the way, I don't know that I should go right back to the beginning.
Just let's go back to the bed sitter. Let's go to the bed sitter. What were you?
Even before the
Tell
bed
us
sitter,
about,
I think there's a whole story before even the bed sitter.
So origins, let's go way back, and I hope we have enough time to do this. But I grew up in Mombasa, so I'm from Coastal, as it were. I grew up, although my family is originally from Tanzania. Yeah, my dad moved to Kenya in the late 60s. We used to work for the East African community before it broke up.
So when he was in East African community,
so he used to work for something called the East African Railways and Harbors. I believe that's what it was called. And he was a civil engineer there. Right. So what happened those days is that I think talent used to be, or rather education was sort of like you went to Makerere for this, you went to University of Nairobi for that. Within the East African community, universities were sort of in various places. So he did his first degree here at University of Nairobi. And it's so interesting because I think my mom and my dad were married when he was still in uni.
What?
Already in uni. I mean, these guys started off like basics. Those days, I think it was just like, let's get married, we'll figure it out, So they were here. And he got a job with the community as, a junior engineer. But then he was traveling all over the region. So what happens is very interesting because I have 5 siblings. We are born all over East Africa. The guys were born in Mombasa, guys born in Nairobi, Arusha, Dar es Salaam, whatever.
What born are you?
Oh, sorry?
What?
Where was I born?
Yeah, no, what, your first born, second born, third born?
I'm 4th, actually.
Fourth?
Yeah, I got 3 older siblings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm somewhere in the middle of the pack. And then I got obviously 2 younger ones. Yeah. So, so somehow all this stuff happened. And I think he was working at the Port of Mombasa at the time, and he lost his job when this whole thing crashed. So the guys I were doing a project with was a British engineering company called Bertland and Partners. And they liked him for some reason. So like, listen, you've lost your job. Why don't we hire you and you work with us?
Mm-hmm.
So he worked with them for a number of years. Everything was hunky-dory. Then I think the project came to an end and those guys, I think, stopped operating in this region.
Mm-hmm.
So now this guy was left out of luck. He now had to start his own engineering practice, civil engineering, structural engineering. So I was actually enjoying the other day that, as a family, as a child, the first thing that we noticed is there was no more conflicts. It now became Kati and Blue Band. Yeah, there's no butter. And just small things, you just notice something has changed over here. Yeah, schools, I think, Gava schools, So you just sort of get a sense like, things are different. Clearly dad is whatever. But what I noticed, he worked very hard. And for me, my dad was kind of like my hero. Like, he's what I call a man's man. Like, he was just a hardcore, old school African dad. And me, I think those guys of the 60s, the first generation coming out of independence, were just a whole different cut. Just like very stoic, very, very on top of their things. That's what I find about that generation. Even when I look at my own friends and the fathers who are like friends, there's sort of this archetype about the way they operate. But anyway, I digress. The point is, things were like this, and he started his own practice called Beacom Consultants. And he's locked away. And I remember he would drop us in school. He'd come back later. You wouldn't see him until the morning because, of course, those days there's no internet. So he's working in the office. But fast forward, and he became quite successful. And of course, circumstances changed. Went to good schools. My siblings went to the US, things like this. So life was hunky-dory. And then, unfortunately, he fell ill quite unexpectedly. And after being in hospital like for 2 years, he passed on, as a result of the illness. And for me, the entrepreneurial journey kind of starts there because I remember like I was in university at the time at USIU. After that, so to speak, high school. And things now financially also became thick, as a family. And I was in uni and it was financially challenging. I couldn't continue. And in the midst of all this, I loved 2 things, hospitality and IT or digital, whatever you want to call it now. And I love technology. And it kind of started off because when my dad was running his practice, he was one of the early guys in the country to buy a computer to do his engineering. But also, I remember he bought us a home computer called a ZX Spectrum, which I used, and my brother and I learned how to code it. So he used to buy games. Then at some point, he came back, I think, for one of his international trips, he came back to like this thick book of code. So you guys, I'm not buying you any more games. You're going to now code your own games.
Wow.
So me and my bro would work late into the night, and hopefully Kenya Power doesn't go off. And it's connected to the TV, and you save it on audio tapes. And we started learning how to code. We started like, you move this, it changes this character, it changes this. So we're coding as, young kids, so to speak, me and my older brother. And that was kind of like the love of technology started. Yeah. But also when he got his computer in the office, I remember installing viruses. He even allowed me to go for training at one of these colleges. And anyway, long and short of it, that's where my computer love started. Now, fast forward to where the school thing becomes a problem in uni and all. And I just knew I need to figure something out. So I remember coming across a magazine somewhere in that intersection around the start of the internet. And it was talking about all these things. And it was just around the time when a company called Netscape was starting out. Yeah. So Netscape was the first web browser company at the beginning. Yes. Mark Andreessen, who's now at Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capitalist guys. That's one of the founders. So I saw this thing and I remember saying to myself, the moment that blew my mind was seeing this cover of the Fortune magazine, I think it was, and Mark Andreessen was sitting on a mock throne, barefoot, and he was valued at $40 million because of the IPO. Which year was that? That was sometime in the late 90s. No, was it? Yeah, late
96.
14, and I remember looking at this, and it was my age, and I said, that's it. I need to figure this internet thing out. So I sent out my CVs. I tried to start my own ISP. I spoke to a lot of wazés I knew. The wazés were like, no, you get a job and then use your own money. They didn't have time to give me money. Yeah. So I applied for a job. And as it turns out, the job I got was through a relationship that my sister had with the founder. This is a company called Formnet. Formnet is one of the early ISPs. So, life has weird ways of working out. So I send my application. I'm in Mombasa. They reach out to me. She's asked me, are you the brother of so-and-so? I went to school with her. So I guess that was the reason I got the job. So I became an installer and also a sales rep, going around offices, installing internet, but also dial-up internet. So somehow I did such a brilliant job that every time the competitor, which was Africa Online, would go into the market, they would tell Moses is already here, he sorted us out. Because I was part of the Rotary network as a Rotractor. Okay. I was in rugby. I was playing for the Mombasa Sports Club then. So rugby is another passion I had at the time. I used to play a lot of rugby. And through my networks, I just had this ridiculous Mombasa network. Yeah. So I was just closing the sales everywhere in town through my networks. So they saw me as a valuable asset to bring into the company. So I'd already applied to Africa Online. But then one of the guys used to play rugby within USIU, in the USIU rugby team, noticed he was also based in Mombasa. Like, Moses, you're killing us. I think we need to bring you in. So I already applied to Africa Online. And of course, those days we used to actually put CVs in a letter and put a stamp on it and go to the post office. He went all the way back to Nairobi during one of his return visits to Nairobi because he lived here, that's where he grew up, got my CV, gave it to the GM and said, listen, you need to hire this guy. So again, rugby networks, I can't tell you how much business I've done through my rugby network. And therefore, I was given an offer. I joined them, and so it began. So I worked with Africa Online for a while. I got into initially connectivity, connecting people in homes. Then I got into the web division. We had a division that was doing websites called Internet Business Solutions. So I switched to that. Started selling websites and the likes to hotels and businesses in Mombasa.
Selling websites. Yes. How would you sell a website?
Hey, those days it was crazy. You had to kind of describe almost using a brochure concept, like we have a 5-page website, we have a 1-page website.
Oh my goodness.
There was no content management systems. It was all very basic. But I realized, my God, when Mombasa is a holiday, the coast strip is all tourism. So that was a natural fit. So I was able to onboard many customers, did that for a number of years. And then a company called 3 Mice came onto the scene.
3 Mice, the Kendall.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're running in Africa Online. We're kind of like the Google of the day at Africa Online in Kenya. And it becomes very apparent that this company called 3 Mice is doing a pretty good job because they started winning clients from us. So in the midst of all this, when I'm at Africa Online, I sort of get to know the 3 Mice guys through mutual networks, Ken Njoroge, Paul Kukubo, and the likes. And then the Africa Online guys had a massive project called, I think we're calling it Project Panama. And rather, there was a whole bunch of things going on, but African recognized the brilliance of 3 Mice. 3 Mice, but there was a simple little office somewhere on Ngong Road. And when you got there, you were shocked to see how small their setup was and what they were doing on digital. But I got to know them. And I saw that I told the guys in Kenya, in Mombasa, I want to move to Nairobi. Can you give me an opportunity? They didn't give it to me. I then resigned from the position I had. And I just knew I had to move to Nairobi and join these guys. So literally with no job, no plan, I just quit, got my last payments, got on a bus, I believe, came to Nairobi, and I just literally pleaded my way into a job.
So you didn't have a job when you're resigning. I didn't have
a plan.
You just knew whatever it takes for getting into 3 Mice.
I didn't know I'm going. I was also dating somebody in Nairobi at the time, so it kind of worked that way well. So I moved up to Nairobi for a period. I didn't know what was going to happen. All I knew is I'm not coming back to Mombasa without a job. And I think I was also talking to Wananchi at the time, Wananchi Communications, which is now Zuku. So I literally harassed them into a job. I think I took a 50% pay cut to get that job. But I said, I need to be in the right environment to succeed. I'm in Nairobi. I'm in the best kick-ass agency for this thing. I'm going to join it. So I got the job. And I'll never forget day one. Ken Njoroge. Ken Njoroge is a very interesting guy. I remember joining and I was so excited. He said, oh, you've arrived. Okay, good stuff. We have a pitch. So I literally dropped my bags at reception or something. And we got for a few meetings. And then day one at 3 Mice, I worked, I think, until 3 a.m. with Ken. We're putting a pitch together for a company called First Africa, which was in investments. And then I think by 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., we're back in the office. And then we're cruising off to the meeting to pitch. That was day one at 3 Mice. For me, it's always been very instructive. That thing of that entrepreneurial, I don't know what you want to call it. I think the word is grit.
Grit.
Do whatever it takes to win the business.
Yeah.
Work until midnight if you must and beyond. And that for me is very important because even in the early days of starting my company, that's exactly what it became. You had to do whatever you needed to do. So I worked with them for, I think, a couple of years. Things changed. And at some point now it became clear I could do my own thing. So I remember I used to handle a lot of our clients who could not afford 3 Mice because I think our entry-level price then was like $5,000. But then I keep meeting guys who are like, look, I only have $1,000, only have 200K. Can you do something? I'm like, oh, I can't. I have a threshold I have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of all of this stuff, as life would have it, my mom at some point in this whole story was diagnosed.
So which years are these?
These are around 2001, 2002. But you see, like now what happened is I started doing informal projects on the side.
Okay.
So I meet a guy that
The
200K.
Kenyan hustle.
Yeah, then I worked with a colleague who's a designer. And partly driven by the fact that actually at some point my mom was diagnosed with cancer. So I needed that extra cash. I needed, some money, to sort of start looking into this. And it just started almost organically. I didn't plan for it. And without really realizing, I sort of accidentally fell into my entrepreneurial dream, more out of need than a plan, that I need to make more money. I remember even getting a nice check from a travel company, but I couldn't bank it because I couldn't afford to open the bank account at Standard Chartered. So I had to borrow money from a friend, use that money to open the bank account, and then bank the check. Like really basic. Then I had to register the company. A good lawyer friend of mine did that. He also introduced me to a guy called Robert Quetch, who became my co-director. I invested in the business. We got computers. We got a place to work from. And pretty much we started from that point, So Dot Savvy at that point, really, we didn't have any. We had a few clients. There, people like ABC Bank. We had, I think, Avenue Healthcare. And a few others. And the funny thing is, many of them, when I was resigning, I actually went to them office by office because I was about to close the deals. And I was like, look, I'm moving on. Here's your new account manager. Here's your new person. I'm moving on. And then they would call me later and say, listen, boss, we like you. We want to work with you. And that was scary for me because I had this respect for Ken and Paul. And I was like, I don't ever want to be the kind of person who's seen as poaching a client. But meanwhile, I'm starting up. I've got a baby on the way, And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? So many clients initially just had that confidence in me, the person. That's why sometimes even when you talk about venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, they say they bet on the jockey, not the horse. Yeah, if they believe in you for something, they've seen something about you that's unique or valuable, and they have a vibe with you and have a connection with you, they tend to support you. And that's how we started off with it's ridiculous to think a startup had clients like that. A bank, I think we had an insurer, we had a healthcare business. And we kicked it off the ground with very good accounts.
So how did you know it was time to switch? When did that moment come?
It did. Again, it happened to me. So something really weird happened. I don't know if I shared that with you guys before, but as I was doing my moonlighting, as it were, I was apparently doing a very good job. And one of my clients met one of the Three Mice founders at a social engagement. I believe at a place called The Pavement, if you remember that one.
I remember Pavement.
And ironically, my lawyer friend was there, the one who helped me register the business and all. So he's like a confidant. He's in there. So he's not socializing, he's there. And this person, I think, had a few drinks and decides to release information to Paul.
Oh.
That I love the work Moses is doing for us. And it's like, what work? Oh, yeah, Moses, he works. He's doing my website, whatever. I'm like, So my lawyer friend said, God has a way of being in the right places for you. He calls me there, and I think I was at some other local somewhere having a drink. And he said, Moses, you've been busted. Your boss now knows
You're moonlighting.
You're moonlighting.
You're after work.
So you, whatever you're doing, go sober up. Sort yourself. I think I rolled up in the office the next day because, I had my computers and all at home. I was working from home. And I went to the office and I just made sure that any evidence of what I was doing was there. I then printed out a nice resignation letter because now I was pushed. I didn't have a choice. And I didn't feel it was ethical to have this and work there. And I think a few days passed and I was just waiting for Paul to call me in and, drop the news. Then I noticed something wasn't happening. And then we had a conversation and he was just like, look, Moses, we like you. We don't mind. We need to find a way through this. I'm like, well, I can't now because I have this entrepreneurial dream that's coming into focus almost by force. It's like, that we have a horizon of, I will eventually do this. But now it is thrust upon you. You must do it. And I just had to make the jump literally at that moment. Initially, it probably looked like, the worst thing that could happen. But because now essentially the bridges were burned, I now had to move forward. Or the boats were burned, so to speak. I had to move forward with this. And there it started, so I didn't have an office, serendipity. My lawyer introduced me to Robert. We got together, injected some money, we started using our networks to bring clients. And the rest of it is almost like a miracle. We just started working. And lo and behold, at some point, I think we're probably the size of Three Mice. We were one of the top 2 or 3 web agencies at that point because social media had not yet happened. And there we went, So, a lot of good luck along the way, a lot of hard work along the way. But of course, a lot of ups and downs. I would never say that it was ever and continues to never be an easy ride. There are good days and bad days and so forth. But coming back to what Joy was saying, so as businesses go, things were changing, social media came along, started having company issues. I'd say at some point, me and my co-director were not really on the same page. He also had other priorities in his life. And I'll never forget this because in the midst of this so-called dark moments, where it was very clear that Dotsavi might fail, and we'd gone through so many challenges, including one of the bigger agencies poaching employees with
Just as
zero
social media
notice.
hit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
social media is coming in. They are then also poaching our employees without giving them notice. The guy, you'd have a meeting on a Friday, and as you go to the house and open your internet at home, you'd find that 5 of your employees have resigned now. And on Monday morning, you have a meeting with ICA to pitch some ideas, and you have no employees.
Wow.
Yeah, things like those happen to us, what I call existential threats. But as social media was coming in, I'll never forget seeing an ad for, I think it was Squad Digital when they were first starting up, which is where a lot of our employees also ended up.
Score Digital was a WPP company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a. It was probably
also a new kid on the block who were just.
Yeah, but they were the first real digital agency. And I think for me, the instructive part of that experience was they opened up the real digital opportunity. They really showed us what was possible.
They unlocked the value, actually, also.
Because until that point, it felt like we're kind of like being fundies or doing a bit of this, a bit of that. But then you sort of saw that agency packaging around digital that had been lacking until that point. And even they were sort of able to unlock the big budgets that were in that opportunity. So all they did is like, Coca-Cola went to the banks and just told them, look, we now do more than creative, we can do digital. And they just consolidated. So many of us as agencies, we lost all that business. The independent digital agencies like 3 Mice ourselves, Metrocomi at that time, we all lost most of our accounts because they all came back in, to the scan groups and so forth. But meanwhile, in the midst of all this, social media is happening and the business is now starting to tank.
I think that's 2009 now.
Somewhere around thereabouts, yeah. So my wife sends me this thing and it's a job.
Are you also blogging at that point?
I have started blogging at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm creating content. Sorry, thank you for reminding me about that. So I'm creating content online because I think for me, at that point, blogging was almost like a therapy. I'd use it to sort of share insights. Writing has always given me comfort. Creating content, so to speak, has always given me comfort. But I'd write shit stuff, and that's the time when the iHub was happening. Remember, we were also moving towards I think there was also that post-election period when Ushahidi was happening. So around all that area, I think social media was now also coming in. And I get this job thing from my wife, and it's like, look, there's a job somewhere for classifieds business, and they're looking for somebody. So I just apply. And 30 minutes later or so, I get a call from South Africa because the head company, which was Naspers, was based in SA. And they asked me, Moses, are you the guy who's the blogger? My boss is asking. I said, yes, my blogger. So he's flying to Nairobi to meet you next week. These are the days he's available. Give us your time. And that's when sort of like the penny dropped in the sense that until that point, I didn't know how important my content was until that job opportunity came up. And then I go for the interview, which was at the Norfolk Hotel, and it felt like it wasn't an interview. It was more like a rubber stamp. They were just like, okay, so how are you going to work with us if you still have a company? I'm going to get general manager. How are you going to work with us if you're still blogging? Will you have time to do this? Okay, it's a startup, And I think I had my offer letter 2 days later. And I was going to make something like 4 times what I was making in Dotsavi then. So when you talk about the gap in my spaces, I had the company's always been running, but I had these moments where I stepped out due to socioeconomic challenges or an opportunity to sort of do something different without necessarily losing your business. Yeah. And I think that's another thing I'd say to entrepreneurs or startups, that there's got to be a moment where you can separate yourself from your business and do other things. Because that also allows you to have a new perspective, where you put your business in the hands of others. And maybe the most you do is every end of day, you open another laptop, not the work laptop, and you check to see what's happening in your company. But it was very instructive because then I understood the concept of you can be in the business, but you're not the business. Yeah, that you can separate yourself from the two. But going back to the content piece, that's one of the things that happened. I landed a very good job in digital where I learned so many new skills that I use today. Finally understood the whole digital content space in ways that I didn't understand before. I had these new perspectives because of that. Another thing that happened because of content was I remember when Samsung Africa reached out to me to go speak at the Exco event, I think around the time of 2010. I think that's when the World Cup was happening in SA.
Yeah.
So that particular year was also a time when smartphones were coming into Kenya, digital was taking off, iHub is buzzing, and I'd been writing stuff about the need for local content. And somewhere in this thing called the internet, the head of Samsung South Africa was online, and he found this thing I'd blogged about. So I wasn't checking my blog email very frequently. And then they called my office because they Googled me, saw me somewhere, and they called the office and said, listen, we're trying to get a hold of Moses. He's needed in South Africa and Johannesburg to give a presentation on local content in East Africa for our Exco team. Like, what? So I check online, and the next thing they asked me is, what is your consulting fee to attend an Exco? I have no idea. So me, as we like to say in Kenya, kujaribu tu.
Yeah.
I just said, I think $2,500. Okay, that sounds fair. I was like, I probably could have charged more.
Yeah.
So the next thing, I'm getting a South African Airlines ticket. My hotel is booked, beautiful hotel. I get picked up from the airport, VIP style. And I'm here to do a 1-hour presentation for $2,500 in South Africa. Again, content. And the best thing about that particular engagement, I remember, is you're going to the airport after my engagement, they gave me pocket money to do shopping because they know like when guys come from East Africa, they're usually buying go and things. So, of course, you go to Woolworths, you go buy clothes, and you come home with things. And that was really that moment that I realized the impact of content. And that is where I think almost my real understanding of the sort of blogging, content creator economy moment started for me. Because invariably, when I started doing that, Samsung now would engage me in East Africa. I'd get all the latest phones. I had the very first Samsung Galaxy in Kenya. It was me. It was sent for me from South Africa and given to the Kenyan guys. Give that guy the phone to review. And I still work with Samsung till today. But more importantly, content has been, for me, a gateway to opportunities. And invariably, what has also happened over the years is the work I do on content as a blogger, as a podcaster, is now cascading even into bringing business into .savvy. So it kind of acts as the tip of the spear that allows me to open possibilities for the business in different ways.
Yeah.
And that continues today. So basically what you find is that I have the agency that's working fine. We've transitioned to social media and content creation. I use my content creator persona to do the blog posts and everything. I work with brands there as well. And it all kind of works together. And I'm also a digital trainer. I work with organizations to train people on digital marketing. So all those things kind of have converged as a result of content.
Of content.
Yeah.
I have a question. I mean, when we look at businesses, I mean, I've heard you talk about a couple of things. 20 years in business is not a joke.
Yes.
23.
23 years.
Yeah.
I have no hair left. Can you see?
Yeah. How many times have you had to evolve the business? Right? Especially .savvy, right? I'm seeing a lot of evolution.
Yes.
I mean, and in 20 years, so much has changed. Number two, what I liked is you talking about how you're not your business, right? And I find that is usually a very hard thing to do upon end because it's your baby. Then building your personal brand that also sustains you as well. Like, what has that journey been like? How is that looking? Like in terms of you, so much commoditization is happening.
Yeah. So there's
What lessons have you learned from?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack, and I don't know whether we'll have enough time to do it all. But let me go back to basics. I think there's several things that have happened along the way that are very profound. If I go back to say .savvy, let me just be very clear about what the internet was then. It was email, all right, email, and it was web, all right. So what that meant is, even as we were setting up .savvy in the three mices, we were building websites, we were hosting websites, we were managing websites. Yeah. That was the internet. And then you had email to communicate. Yeah. Then somewhere in the midst of that, things started happening like AOL Instant Messenger and stuff like that. People were chatting on those platforms. Those are now the precursors to your WhatsApps and so forth. For us, what was very scary was that when the social media moment happened, many of our clients didn't think we knew what to do in that space, which was true. Yeah. And transitioning from being a web agency to a full digital agency was hard because remember, until that point, you built the perfect machine in that agency for conceptualizing, building, managing, supporting, advertising websites. That's all you do. Yeah. The perfect machinery is you don't know anything about content creation because the content comes from the client. You don't know anything about running ad campaigns in the way that we do today on Facebook and so forth. So we had to build an entirely new skill set to do so. And this became an existential issue because now we had to hire new people, social media managers for the first time. We had to hire project managers just for content versus building a website. Completely different skill set. And then in the midst of this, I think we're now moving into yet another transition as a result of content, where now we've had to learn how to do things like video production, going out and doing shoots, commercials, documentaries, and stuff. Because at the core of everything today, content is key. And I'll tell you right now, even as a company, the majority of our work is social media and content. Websites continue to be important, but the bulk of the work is now social media and content.
Mm.
Right? Even in December, when we were closing the year, we were doing a digital animation video for a development organization where we had to unpack the 7 different projects they accomplished over a period of the program. That had nothing to do with websites, had nothing to do with social media. It's content production. And that's a completely different skill set. So for me, those rises and falls, or what they'll call feasts and famines, we've experienced with each transition. When we went to the web, we went to the apex. Social media, we've gone to the apex. And the next big thing that we have to unpack is AI.
AI.
And AI, of course, is collapsing even some of the models we have today because the cost of production of content, if you're using a platform like ChatGPT, you kind of look over at your social media team and you're like, okay, guys, how do we add more value than what ChatGPT can do? What do your skill sets become when ChatGPT can create a content calendar in 2 minutes? And a pretty decent one at that.
Yeah.
How do you start using AI as the bedrock of the future of your company? So that's where we are now, where we're trying to understand what does that transition look like? What does it take? Because nobody has the playbook.
Mm-mm.
Everyone is grappling, trying to figure it out. Yeah.
And AI is not the future, it's actually now.
It's actually already happened.
Yeah.
It happened.
It happened.
It happened.
I think one of my favorite quotes usually when it comes to maybe AI 3 years ago was the future is already here. It's not evenly distributed. For me, it feels like it is now getting evenly distributed.
Yes.
It's a thing.
Mm.
And it's probably another, and especially for you, sorry to take you back, this inflection points where you have to make switches in terms of who you are, how you operate.
Yeah.
You must have had a couple of those in your journey so far, including now.
Yeah.
Pivoting and making a
Yeah.
switch up like, okay, I need this new skill or whatever.
It's often a leap of faith, to be honest. You know, you sit with the client, to be honest, some of those moments, you're now signing up a social media client for the very first time. You hire somebody who you know worked at another agency that did social media. They come on board and then you realize maybe they were not the person they said they were in the CV because the content is not quite, mathing. There's also the way the client engagements are handled because, historically we were positioned as a web design company. So guys know you as a web fundi, not as a social agency, whatever.
Yeah.
So even just unpacking yourselves to use the language, there's even a verbiage that's used in agency world that we don't use when your techies building websites.
Correct.
We had to sort of reposition, repackage. That stuff was hard, man. Being able to confidently pitch, I can do your social media. And right now, to be honest, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You've gone online and you're literally making it up as you go along. Yeah. And what I've noticed is when you're doing those transitions, it's literally a leap of faith because you do the homework, you hire the right people, you hope, and then you try and do the engagement. And man, you make mistakes. In fact, the client even starts wondering, do you guys really know what you're doing? Are you really on top of this? And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. Nobody has it right at the get-go. You make it up, then you start learning from experience. This is what's going on, this is what's going on, this is what's going on.
But you have to do it. You can't improve
It's
on something you're not doing.
You don't do it, you go. Today we make probably 80% of our revenue around social media and content. The web business probably brings only 20%.
Yeah.
It's a reality. And then the other thing that I learned in the business was recurrent revenue. One of the things that changed our business was when we realized historically we just did projects. So you'd come in, you get a project of 1M, half an M, build a website, then the money is gone. And then where's the rest of your money coming from? So we started selling things like website maintenance. We manage your website, we update it, we optimize it. Social media, we have to give you a monthly content calendar. We do community management. We do many things for you to manage your socials. So that gives you a steady income.
Developing, selling internet, building websites.
Yeah.
That business has completely shifted. Now it's 2080.
Yeah, it's 80. It's purely content. And then there are other auxiliary services that we have, things that you might take for granted. I mean, I think we host in excess of maybe 200 websites. Now, when you do the numbers, that is a substantial business because when you're hosting people like insurance companies and banks, the fees are not small. And then you have to manage the website. You have to secure it. So that's a tidy little business that can actually support itself. Domain name registration sounds trivial, but if you're handling, hundreds of domains, you're making a few thousand shillings each, it adds up. So you have these legacy businesses that we've had for, 20 plus years. And then you have these new opportunities and new areas that now come into focus. Like there's a video we shot last year, for one of our clients in the internet space. an internet service provider that serves underserved communities. We put together the scripts. We got a production team. We went to Nanyuki. We had drones. And even when you're doing it, you're kind of pinching yourself because you're like, I can't believe we're doing this. We can do this.
Somebody's
We
paying us for
know
this.
how
Yeah.
to do this.
Yeah.
And then when guys are calling you out, you're like, have you done it? Like, yeah. Check out this video. Yeah. Can you do digital animation? The work we did in December. Check this out. And sometimes I have to be honest with you, you're actually making it up as you go along. But part of the entrepreneurial guts, I would say, is that you jump into situations not knowing if you're going to find a floor under you. And then you have to create it as you're going. Like literally, you've taken that confidence, you got that deposit payment, and even you're telling your team, guys, we cannot screw this up.
Yeah.
They have our confidence. They've trusted us. We must deliver.
Mm-hmm.
We must deliver.
And I feel like that kind of drive came from even 3 Mice.
Yes.
It's a skill that has been built over time.
Absolutely.
That you just get in and do the work and do it at the best.
Actually, my philosophy in life and everything I do, I say to say yes first, figure it out later. That's part of the success. That's part of the magic. Because once you commit, once you sign that dotted line, literally or figuratively, now everything boils down to a delivery or execution. And I have to be honest with you, most of the world are not built that way. They want certainty. They want guarantees. They want to know, is there a flow when I land or not?
But life doesn't give you that.
No. Yeah. And that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. Like I think I was saying to you the other day, I think being an entrepreneur is like being in a car. There's no cushion. You're sitting on a metal chair.
Yes.
There's no suspension. And you're driving through a badly potholed road.
Yeah.
It's wobbling, it's shaking.
Yes.
And what it is you rise and fall on everything you do. That one last minute call that you made towards the end of the day could be that call that brings in the payroll money. It happened. I have a story to share with you. One of our earliest clients, our phone line in the office was cut off because those days, by the way, you didn't call people on their mobile phones.
No.
You called the office line. Yeah. It was rude to call somebody's mobile phone.
And then you print the extension.
Call.
Yeah, a PABX, where are you calling? Okay, let me check if he's in. That's how we called our clients. You did not send a PDF proposal. You went and you had a binder in your office, or you went to a place, they bound it. Seal honey? Yeah. They bound it, whatever, and then you hand delivered the...
Or maybe branded or something.
But you'd go to a place that they'd print and bind and whatever your thing. In those days, we didn't have like a messenger or anything. We used to do everything ourselves. Yeah. And I'll never forget this. The office lines were cut off. Guys were like two months of payroll overdue. This is now I think the year 2002 or 2003. And things are elephant. Nothing is working. Yeah. Internet has been cut off in the office. You've not paid Access Kenya. So you guys, all you know is that this thing you've printed, this whatever you're going to present to your client, if they don't give you a check now, there's a very real possibility you're dead. So we go to Wilson Airport. This company was called East African Safari Air. Very nice guy called Mr. Kigode, one of our early supporters. We go to his office. We've done the pitches. We've done the designs. We're ready to bring the project on board. And we know, like, if this money doesn't come out, at least a check. So we sit there. And of course, when you're in a startup mode, an entrepreneur, you play calm. And you're like, this is just another day. It's normal. You're not telling him like,
but under the water, you're just panicking.
They don't know the phone is cut off, internet is cut off. They don't know that they're the one who's going to open the door. So you walk into the office and he's like, okay, we're ready to go. And then he asked me, with the Robert was with me, my co-director, and he's like, do you guys want this payment in cash? Now, the first instinct is to like, hell yes.
Yes.
But then you're like very calm. Yeah, we can handle that. It's okay. Yeah, it's not a problem. So you're okay, you can take it, okay?
Yes.
So his PA takes us there and then they open this safe that's got like shillings and dollars and things because, it was an airline business. Yeah. And they count out the cash, give it to us. And she's like, listen, I know it's Friday, but don't drink the money. Go and bank it right away. I'm like, yeah, we'll do it. So I remember we were driving out of Wilson Airport with Robert in my little 205, rickety 205.
With no suspension?
It was as barely painted. It was just smoky. It used to smoke. We were startups to those guys. And me and Robert are just in the car, we're chilling. You feel back at the gate. Then you're out of earshot. All I remember is that as we're leaving Wilson Airport, we're just screaming in the car. You can't understand. That's you want to talk about the hand of God.
Yes.
That was the hand of God. It was probably something like 300K. Those days, which was probably something like 700K.
Mm-hmm.
And we just called the guys in the office, probably in our Nokia 3310s those days, like, guys, go Jenny, we're coming. And literally distributed tunes, paid the salos. We went for a drink up down the road. We were in Westlands at the time, went to one of the pubs nearby and had a hell of a drink up. And it was just like, you're looking up to God and saying, how can you do that? Yeah. How can you come in and just sort it like that? It was almost like, It was just a miracle.
Yeah.
And then you're broke again. But the point is, those are the kind of entrepreneurial stories. At the time I ran out of fuel, the time when my first child was born, I literally left Nairobi Hospital, I think, with 500 bob in my pocket. I had nothing. Didn't have insurance. So I paid cash. And it was a C-section. So entrepreneurial journeys are like this. All the time when I was living, I think, in Tigoni, and, I'd be coming down the hills and you turn off the engine so that mafuta isishe. Yeah, and just so many stories. And if I told you some of the stories that we experienced those days, even with Ken when you're setting up Cellulant, some of us early entrepreneurs in the tech space in Kenya, there are stories I'm telling you guys you would not believe. Things were so basic, things were so simple, things were so hard, because what was a website then? What did it matter? How many guys were even online? You were literally at the cutting edge of the latest and greatest thing. And we were literally building the roads into these new opportunities, So that's where we were. That's where we came from.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. But after 23 years, when you look at Africa, when you look at where we are, where is Adosabi going? Where are you going?
Brilliant. So there are many things that are happening right now, but probably the biggest takeaway I have right now today is there's never been, number one, a time when the nature and the business of content has been more important. Safaricom held an event that was only for influencers. If you saw how many guys had showed up for that event, you'd be like, oh my God, we have an influencer community. It's massive. And they said, we do not mind media because we believe you guys are the future. We think you guys are important to us. Safaricom has understood this. And that's why they work with people like us. Going to Dotsavi, I think the way forward is very clear. We need to find a way to play into the two areas of content in a very serious way, and number two, AI. Because the AI is a complete paradigm reset, right? When Jensen Wang, when Jensen Wang of NVIDIA, the guys who create the GPUs, the processors that underpin AI.
His keynote at CES.
Yes, exactly. And even the new AI machine that they bought, which I blogged about as well. But interestingly, he said something very profound. He said AI was going to be bigger than the internet itself. When I first heard that statement, I laughed. And then I started seeing it. Talk about a company like Jacaranda Health. They have a product called Prompts. It's an AI that works on SMS on Mulikamwizi phones or Kabambes. You can ask questions to an AI using SMS. So when you start thinking about it, that there's no internet interface in that interaction, then it cuts across everything. Or even diagnostics. There's somebody who was working at, I believe, Gertrude's Children's Home. The IT manager used to be there. And he told me, Moses, we're seeing situations where we use AI in the medical diagnostics and you come into the broken leg, but the same situation tells you, but we're also seeing instances of what could be cancer here. So the power of that technology is so ridiculous that it cuts across everything, including even agriculture, where guys are running up drones with software, and then this thing tells you water these areas, because that's where we can see the deficiency.
I also saw that, like, for example, armyworms are called armyworms because they go from one plot to another.
Exactly.
Using drones and AI, you can track where they are and see their movement.
And where to now do the business. And that means more efficient, more cost-effective. So it's going to be cross-cutting. And that's why I'd say the next iteration of the company, especially going 2025, is going to be trying to figure out how to make this work for our clients, but also looking at sort of ourselves, of course, production-wise, which we've already started doing. Like the way we do our meetings now, it's all automated. The person who takes notes doesn't take notes. They use read.ai and it captures all of that.
I kick those bots out of the meeting, though.
I always think it's so funny that the bots arrive before the people.
Exactly.
Right?
They're on time.
Yes.
Yeah. But basically, it's so cross-cutting and so holistic in the way it's working that it's the next big reset. And what you tend to find is when at these strategic inflection points, you are always two opportunities. Are you going to be on the winning side of it?
Yeah.
Or are you going to be a casualty? And that's what you need to be asking yourself.
An adopter or a denier?
Yeah. And people always, I think humanity, we struggle with nostalgia. We struggle with familiarity, where we want to hold on to the things that have worked for us until now in the clear evidence of things having changed. We hold on to that. And that's why you have to have that constant learner mentality, that clean slate mentality, what they like to call the blue ocean, where you see something not for what it is, but what it can become.
Exactly.
So in this inflection point for everyone, it's actually a complete reset again.
It breaks all the rules completely.
Okay, so if you're starting afresh, this will be like V-Pesa. And if you're building a company, you can make such a huge...
Yeah.
But look at the convergence. We have AI becoming the new normal. And then concurrently, this issue of content and personalities. Right. And personality could also be a metaphor for a company. meaning that the company can be a personality because
Yeah.
brands are personalities,
Yes.
but they can also be at the very cutting edge of the content practices that are
Mhm.
changing everything. I probably get more respect as a content creator in client meetings than I do as an entrepreneur of my business. As it's like Moses first, company second.
And I think also, Moses, you're able
Yeah.
to earn more from your content
Yes,
than
it's
from
scary.
just your
It's scary. I get a lot of solicitations now for people to do business. They're looking for B2B content because I speak to B2B. So I speak to mostly C-level people who are looking for insights and so forth, or products that they're trying to reach people through that nature. And it's scary to think that the personal brand is not only overtaking the business brand, it's now starting to earn more than the business brand. And that's the reality going forward.
And that's the reality we have, and that's the future.
Yeah.
Everyone becomes a media house, personal brands.
There. And then underpinning it is AI. I use AI like you can't believe. I probably spend over $200 a month on AI tools. Whether it's Otter, whether it's, different for different purposes
Yeah.
to do what I do.
Yeah, actually,
Me too.
I feel that AI has helped our podcasts because there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And I feel because it's really like it wasn't for AI, we probably wouldn't be doing the things like the Bollywood was. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And then also, I think one of the biggest things that's happening to us as well is developing new skills for the in our own content.
Yeah.
I think for us is the first time we said to, hey, let's do our own cutouts. Plan each other. Got into CapCut and we're like, wait a minute. So for me, it's something that has also shit in technology is I think people talk about and probably don't pay attention to is democratization or commoditization. So what's happening is you will find probably from a technology perspective, what used to be manual things are now a dashboard. Exactly. Professions like media buying, where now it's a dashboard. Like it's been made so easy for anyone, an individual. So in the age of everything is just mass produced, put together in a small little box or technology where you can actually teach yourself. So I think you're right. I think the time has come where.
But there's another caveat to that.
Yeah.
As much as it's lowered the barriers to adoption or entry in terms of everyone now can do it, it therefore puts even a higher premium on actually doing it well.
Nah.
Yeah, meaning that those who are exceptionally good at creating content that resonates, that is relevant, that is at the zeitgeist or whatever is happening that catches attention, will be that much more successful because their standards will be even significantly higher, or rather their product is better than everyone else, given that now it's fully democratized.
That's one of those things where the market just shifts itself again. It's just like it's open to everyone, but then again, you will find people rising to the top who do.
Yeah,
such a thing.
And maybe the last two things I want to say, because I know we're out of time, but I think the two things I want to say.
But on the one again, it just feels like we must have an around technology and
The one thing I want to leave people, startups, individuals, businesses, is there's one last thing, which is content is the way. Whatever you want to accomplish today, business or individual, create the content that speaks to your people, the people you want to buy from you, the people who are stakeholders, in a way that positions you as the authority.
A thought leader.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that can be the brand, the business, or the brand and the individual. Number two, don't make a human do a robot's job. That's my AI thing. Don't stay with the past practices because you're nostalgic. Simply do not give the human the work they could do themselves. Yeah.
Community is a big thing as well.
Yes, building a tribe around your content, having relationships with your community is also really essential.
I think that's also why you find like podcasters like Joe Rogan have taken off because of that community. We need community. And when it's the loneliness. There's a loneliness index that's happening around across us. And so there are more people in the space who are now having conversations. And when you're listening to a podcast, sometimes you also feel like you're included in that podcast.
Correct.
And therefore it's like now podcasters are now the leaders, like thought leaders, or now they're trust people. They're people that people can trust. I think also there's a level of authenticness that I'm not speaking to a robot. I'm speaking to a person.
Correct.
Even with TikTok, you found that I remember the article we're talking about, the Spotify CEO was, he did a TikTok on the financials of the year. And that's such an easy way for you to just absorb that information that also creates a trust with Spotify, because I'm seeing the people within the brand.
Correct.
But then that's also still coming from a point of loneliness that I want to be connected. I need to be connected to this community. And so community is something that also should be
Absolutely.
at the fore.
It's a need to belong.
2025 and above.
It's a need to belong, and then the people who personify what we stand for or what we believe. And Rogan, has 60 million people globally who seem to connect to him.
And it's wild. And another thing, I'm big on shirts. I think even over my career, what has happened is I think sometimes you can spot things happening. They might not be whatever, but you know it's coming. And I remember, I feel now in this age, what's happening is, especially when you talk about people who rise to the top, you also need to put a lot of work educating yourself.
Oh, yes.
And what's happening now, because even if I'm going to prompt AI, I need to have some sort of subject matter expertise or knowledge correct to be able to get the correct output, especially in the where, if you look at how AI is evolving, right? Where you are at generative AI, agentic, whatever. But in between that, you need to know what you're asking.
The subject matter, it's important. And that means basically asking the right question to get the right outcome, which means you need to be pretty deep in the weeds in the subject matter.
Yeah, you got to read more, which is so funny because it's actually counterintuitive in terms of what you're supposed to do. And I've seen even, and sometimes I think you could probably see it even when you get results from somebody who's used to AI. You can actually tell some people.
There's a fingerprint. You can start to see this AI generated, but sometimes it's down to the prompt. On how you ask the question, like
how you structure it.
And it's so funny because increasingly, as much as you say AI is going to take the load off, we still have to read and consume. And I will tell you right now that I can't remember the last time I read a book in a conventional sense, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts.
Yeah.
And that's how I consume most of my content that gives me the knowledge. And
so we want to get smarter. Yeah. No, I heard that. Pretty cool. Yeah, I think this has been amazing. We must have you back.
Well, I hope so. It's also a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I've admired you from afar. And, you guys reached out and said, we'd like you to be out. So honored and grateful for that. And I think also you guys are doing an amazing job. You're putting in so much work into this. And I just love the way you also engage your guests. You've brought me in slowly. We've gotten to know each other. And also as a fellow podcaster, I think you're just doing an outstanding job.
Of course.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Yeah. And I can't wait to come back again. And actually, I think I'm going to do I'm going to invite you guys to be on my podcast.
Hey, pew, pew, pew.
Because I feel like now we're we're real entrepreneurs. I think when we started, we didn't believe that we were, but we have it inside us and it's coming out so strongly because of this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
So absolutely, Sean. I return the favor and hopefully we'll do it right here.
Yeah.
And now you guys can be the hot seat.
Wow.
Cross-pollination.
I wonder how it feels to be on the other side. But yeah, you do well. But thanks so much, guys. Absolutely. No, so this has been amazing. And thank you for your time. And you must come back again. I just feel like where we are in terms of technology and AI is not enough of that. In terms of talking about it and in terms of what it means next for businesses. And the funny thing is, for me, I get this feeling that a lot of businesses now can get too deep. A lot of things that you've gone through over 21 years can actually happen for those and what us in a
2 years or 1 year
in a much faster period. So yeah, thanks. Great. Yeah. Thanks guys. Subscribe.